Peace. I just gotta add on again. One thing about when the Nation of Gods and Earths formally began in the 60s, it left a real nasty taste in the mouth of a lot of people in the Nation of Islam because, the lessons that the Father was teaching to the youth, which was basically a demographic that the Nation of Islam did not target, was something that you had to get if you were a registered member or believer in the Nation of Islam. You couldn't get access to the lessons because they were really guarded, and considered real sacred back then. Not really nowadays, but too much, But they were really considered sacred to a lot of people in the Nation of Islam. And in order to get the Supreme Wisdom book, you had to be examined. You had to go through your classes and register and stuff like that. You had to get your X. You had to write your letter to Chicago, to Farad. That's a whole different story. You had to write your letter to Chicago, and you had to be able to recite your student enrollment, your first 10 lessons. Then you were able to have access to the Supreme Wisdom book or the other lessons. You know what I'm saying? But the Father, he went and he memorized all of the lessons, not the problem book, but he memorized all of the lessons. And when he left the Nation of Islam, this information that was in his head at this time, he began to teach to the youth. So the Nation of Gods and Earths is basically, for all intents and purposes, a youth-orientated movement. You know what I'm saying? Our youth is basically our target group. Not saying that we don't build with other people, but that is basically our demographic. You knowledge me? I could see why it left a real nasty taste in the mouth of a lot of people in the Nation of Islam. For one, the Father was really like a street baller with this math. You know what I'm saying? And if you ever seen it, people compared to organized basketball where they're wearing uniforms and shit like that, and, they're giving nice crisp chest passes and shit like that. To see them play ball against a street baller that's doing all these tricks and behind their back and, you know what I'm saying, you know what I'm saying, and no-look passes and shit like that, it looks completely different. You know what I'm saying? And that's the way the gods carried and the earths carry the math. We carry the math like street ballers. Not to say that we don't understand the fundamentals. Shit, we may be more in tune with the fundamentals than a lot of people that's playing this organized, basketball. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, a lot of people, they hate on that. Real talk. You know what I'm saying? They see the way that you flip in mathematics and talking the language and reciting the lessons and showing the relationship and this and that. Some people get jealous of the shit. You know what I'm saying? Because they're not able to have that type of magnetic with their math. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times that is the situation. A lot of people in the Nation of Islam back then and obviously today have a real nasty taste in their mouth because they ain't got a swag like that with this math. You know what I'm saying? With these lessons and shit. You know what I'm saying? And it's almost like you look at a police officer. You know what I'm saying? A police officer has their uniform. They have their certain rules and regulations that they must follow. They have their restrictive laws and things like that. And, their duty is to uphold justice. I mean, they supposed to be civilized people too. The gods and the earths are like the undercover cops. You know what I'm saying? We have other different rules and regulations. We go places that the police officer in uniform can't go. There's certain things that police officers can't do in uniform that you may see an undercover cop doing. Why? Because that's the kind of social equality they must get amongst in order to build with them. So it's like the Nation of Islam is like the police officers. The Nation of Gods and Earths is like the undercover cops. The Nation of Islam is more or less like, high school, organized basketball players in uniforms with a coach, a leader, a coach. We like street ballers. Everybody got their own style in math. You know what I'm saying? And, that's just basically the difference. You know what I'm saying? We're basically like different, distant cousins and shit. You know what I'm saying? One cousin grew up in the suburbs with everything at their feet, with a silver spoon in their mouth and shit like that. We just grew up in the hood. You know what I'm saying? Doesn't mean that they're more cultured and refined and more civilized than us, and that doesn't mean that we're less cultured, refined, and civilized than them. You know what I'm saying? We just built differently like that. You know what I'm saying? And the thing about it, too, is dealing with the gods and earths, we don't have leaders. You know what I'm saying? The Nation of Islam, you know, when you become a registered member of the Nation of Islam, you become a registered believer. That's what they consider themselves, believers. We don't believe shit. We know what we're talking about. We ain't going to talk about it for the most part. Because knowledge is the foundation. That's what we learn from the door. We don't have leaders. We teach leadership. And we only follow to the extent of learning how to lead ourselves. So there's no big I's and little U's in this nation and shit. The gods and nurse, you know what I'm saying? There's none. You know, everybody is accountable and responsible and has a duty of a civilized person. There's no one greater than anybody else. We have no leaders. We have leadership as a people. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, the Nation of Islam doesn't have that. They have a leader. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, that's just how they deal with things. We don't deal with things that way, you know, not to take anything away from them, you know. But we just deal with things differently and shit, you know. So, you know, I just wanted to add on about that and shit like that. And, you know, I can understand how some people in the nation feel, because I don't just hand lessons out to people either. I don't just give people shit, you know what I'm saying? I check and see if there's said person that ability before I even open up my mouth, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, I could understand some of the reservation about it, but you can't put everybody in a certain category, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, you know, I just wanted to add on about that, too, you know, and give a little history on that whole science, you know, why a lot of people in the Nation of Islam have a nasty taste in their mouth, because, you know, the father was teaching a different demographic, you know what I'm saying? He was giving this information to people that the Nation of Islam didn't necessarily target. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, the thing about it, too, is that when the first resurrection fell, the only people who was holding this down was the gods and nurse. You know what I'm saying? When the fall happened and shit like that, and Elijah went back to essence, or went up on a spaceship, whatever you want to believe, with Farad, there was a lot of people who left the Nation of Islam and, you know, turned to Sunni Islam or did this or did that or whatever. Basically, the nation fell. But when that fall happened, the gods and nurse didn't fall. The 5%ers, we were still building with these lessons. We still held Elijah to our hearts. So you can never sit there and disrespect the gods and nurse or the 5%ers to talk about this and that, because when y'all motherfuckers fell, we were still holding strong. Back in the 70s and shit like that, you could still see gods and nurse on a square quoting the lessons of Elijah, but a lot of y'all motherfuckers forgot it. A lot of y'all got on some other shit, you know what I'm saying? So now y'all trying to act like, you know, some of y'all newbies trying to act like y'all about this. Hell no. When it comes down to it, the gods and nurse is going to be the fathers of this shit. And when it really comes down to it, y'all going to have to come to us and get back. Look at how things is going now in the Nation of Islam, as followed by, you know, the followers of the Farrakhan and shit. Now y'all trying to get back into the lessons. Now y'all trying to study lessons at y'all study circles and shit like that. We've been always on square. Ever since the father went back. You know what I'm saying? Ever since the father was here, we've been on square. And through all of this ebb and flow and up and down this with some of y'all in the Nation of Islam and shit like that, y'all can never sit there and try to disrespect us and talk about how we this and that. Nah, because even if a God is sitting there and he's going through hard times and shit like that, and he drinking and shit like that, or smoking some equality or whatever, he still probably know his lessons. He still holds Elijah close to his heart. You know what I'm saying? So you can never disrespect us on that end. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, we know the answers of Elijah, as asked by his enlightener, Farad Muhammad. We know that by heart. So you can never disrespect us like that. You know what I'm saying? We the fathers of this style. We the fathers of this. Peace.